Stop for a second and imagine discovering that everything you believed was real was carefully planned. Every smile, every moment, every reaction part of something deeper, something hidden, something waiting to be revealed at just the right time. If you think you have seen dramatic stories before, this one will stay with you long after it ends. Stay till the final line because the truth behind the story will not just surprise you, it will change how you see love, choices, and the risks people take when their hearts are involved. It all began quietly, almost too quietly to notice anything unusual. Shen Yue carried herself with the same calm presence everyone was used to, smiling, interacting, living moments that seemed natural and effortless. But beneath that calm exterior was something no one could see, a plan that had already begun long before anyone realized. There was a reason behind every step she took. There was a reason behind every moment she shared with Miles Wei. And there was a reason it all seemed so real. What made it even more powerful was how convincing everything felt. The way they interacted, the way they spoke, the subtle closeness that slowly caught attention, it all built a picture that seemed impossible to question. People watched, speculated, and believed. But the truth was something entirely different, because in her heart, there was only one person she was trying to reach. Dylan Wang. The feeling had been there for a long time, not sudden, not loud, but constant. It was something she carried quietly, something that grew stronger in the moments when he seemed distant, especially when he was seen around others. Each of those moments created a question she could not ignore. Did he feel anything at all? That question became the reason behind everything that followed. The plan was not impulsive. It was built slowly, carefully, with intention. She needed to see something real, not words, not assumptions, but a reaction that could not be hidden. And to do that, she needed a situation that would push everything into the open. That was where Miles Wei came in. He was not just part of the plan, he understood it. There was no deception in his involvement, only agreement to help reveal something that had remained uncertain for too long. What made it complicated was how convincing everything became, how easily the lines between what was planned and what was real began to blur. Moments that started as part of a plan began to carry their own meaning, but the focus never changed. Everything was leading to one point: Dylan Wang's reaction. Days passed, and the story unfolded exactly as intended. The interactions were seen, noticed, discussed. The attention grew, and with it came the possibility that the reaction she had been waiting for might finally appear. But it did not come immediately, and that silence became the most difficult part. There were moments where she questioned everything, moments where the plan felt heavier than expected. What if nothing changed? What if the reaction never came? What if the answer she was searching for was simply not there? Yet she continued, because sometimes not knowing is harder than risking everything to find out. Then, just when it felt like nothing would happen, something did. It was not loud. It was not public. It came quietly, in a way that made it even more powerful. A letter. Simple in appearance, yet carrying something far deeper. When she first saw it, there was a pause, a moment where everything seemed to slow down. The plan, the uncertainty, the waiting, all of it led to this single moment. She held it carefully, aware that whatever was written inside could change everything. And when she opened it, the world shifted. The words were not rushed. They were not unclear. They carried weight, intention, and something that could not be mistaken. It was from Dylan Wang. As she read each line, the emotions behind them became undeniable. This was not a reaction created out of pressure or assumption. This was something real, something that had been there, perhaps hidden, perhaps unspoken, but now impossible to ignore. He spoke about what he felt, not in a way that tried to impress, but in a way that revealed honesty. He acknowledged the distance, the moments where he did not act, the times where silence replaced what should have been said. But most importantly, he revealed something she had been waiting to understand. He cared. Not in a vague way, not in a way that could be dismissed, but in a way that made everything clear. The plan had worked, but it did not feel like a victory, because in that moment, everything became real. The emotions, the risks, the choices, they were no longer part of a plan. They were something that needed to be faced, understood, and accepted. When she finally stood face to face with him again, the atmosphere was different. There was no need for pretense, no need to continue anything that was not real. Everything that had been hidden was now present. He did not start with explanations. He started with honesty. And she did the same. The conversation that followed was not perfect, not smooth, but it was real. They spoke about everything, the plan, the silence, the feelings that had been left unspoken. There were moments of pause, moments where words took time to form, but each one mattered. What made it powerful was not the absence of complication, but the presence of truth. And in that truth, something began to settle. The plan that once felt necessary was no longer needed. Because the answer had already been found. What happened next was not dramatic. It was quiet. A shift in understanding. A change in how they saw each other. A decision to move forward, not based on assumptions, but on what had finally been revealed. As for Miles Wei, his role in the story did not end with the plan. He remained someone who understood the situation from a distance, someone who chose to step back when the truth became clear, not out of loss, but out of respect for what had always been at the center of everything. And now, as you reach this point, think about what this story really means. Is it about the plan? Or is it about the courage to face the truth? Do not just read this and move on. Share it. Talk about it. Let it stay with you. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are not the ones where everything goes as expected, but the ones where everything changes when the truth finally appears. And if you have ever wondered whether taking a risk for love is worth it, this story might just be your answer. The moment the truth was revealed, everything changed, but not in the way anyone expected. It did not explode into chaos. It did not turn into something dramatic and uncontrollable. Instead, it settled into something quieter, something deeper, something that demanded understanding rather than reaction. Shen Yue stood still after reading the letter, her thoughts moving faster than her expression. The plan that once felt necessary now felt distant, almost unreal. What had started as a way to find answers had now become something that required a completely different kind of courage. Across from her, Dylan Wang was no longer hidden behind silence. There was no distance in his gaze now, no hesitation that could be mistaken for indifference. The letter had already said what he needed to say, but being there in person carried a different kind of weight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that needed to be understood was already present between them. Then Shen Yue broke the silence. Her voice was calm, but it carried honesty in its purest form. She admitted everything, not just the plan, not just the reason behind it, but the emotions that led her there. She spoke about the confusion, the moments that made her question his feelings, the times she felt something was there, but could not prove it. She did not defend the plan. She explained it, and that made all the difference. Dylan Wang listened, not with judgment, but with reflection. There was no anger in his response, only a quiet understanding of how things had reached this point. He acknowledged that his silence had played a role, that his hesitation had created the very space that allowed doubt to grow. That realization shifted everything. Because this was no longer about who was right or wrong. It was about what had been missing. And now it was finally being addressed. Their conversation did not rush toward a conclusion. It moved carefully, step by step, as if both of them understood that what they were rebuilding required patience. They spoke about the past, not to hold on to it, but to learn from it. They spoke about what they wanted moving forward, not in vague ideas, but in clear intentions. And somewhere in that conversation, something changed again. The tension disappeared. The uncertainty faded. What remained was something simple, yet powerful. Clarity. For the first time, neither of them was guessing. Neither of them was assuming. Everything was open. Everything was real. And that made the next moment feel natural. Dylan Wang stepped closer, not with urgency, but with purpose. It was not about making a grand gesture, it was about closing the distance that had existed for far too long. Shen Yue did not step back. Instead, she met him halfway. That single movement said more than any words could. It was not just acceptance. It was a choice. A choice to move forward, not as people searching for answers, but as people who had finally found them. As for Miles Wei, his role in their story reached its quiet conclusion. There was no confrontation, no dramatic exit, only a mutual understanding. He had been part of something important, something that revealed the truth, and once that truth was clear, he stepped away without hesitation. Not everything needs a complicated ending. Sometimes, understanding is enough. Days passed, and what followed was not a sudden transformation, but a steady progression. Shen Yue and Dylan Wang did not try to rush into something undefined. They allowed things to grow naturally, this time with communication, with awareness, with a willingness to never return to the silence that once separated them. There were moments of laughter that felt lighter than before, conversations that felt easier, silences that no longer carried doubt. Each of these moments built something stronger, something more stable than anything they had before. And then came a moment that quietly confirmed everything. They found themselves in a place where everything had once felt uncertain. Standing there again, it felt different. Not because the place had changed, but because they had. This time, there were no unanswered questions. No hidden feelings. No need for plans or tests. Only presence. Only honesty. Only something real. Dylan Wang looked at Shen Yue, not searching for reassurance, but appreciating what was already there. Shen Yue met his gaze with the same calm certainty. No words were needed, because everything had already been said, and everything had already been chosen. This was not just an ending. It was a beginning built on truth. And as the story settles into its final moment, there is only one question left. If you were in her place, would you have taken the risk to uncover the truth, or would you have stayed in uncertainty? Think about it. Because sometimes, the answers we are afraid to seek are the ones that change everything.